Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next instalment of the QLOT webinar session for Research Skills for Library Liaison. My name is Jenny Campagnolo from Griffith University, and I'll be helping to moderate today's session. I also have with us today Sue Hickson from Griffith University. Sue is the convener of the Library and Information Services Working Party, as well as Jackie Wilston-Home from James Cook University, who is the convener of the Research Support Working Party. So before we hand over to our host for today's session, just a quick recap for those of you who might be new to Collaborate in these webinar sessions. Just a few reminders as to how the session will run today. Firstly though, before we jump into this, can I just get an idea from everyone if they can hear me loud and clear? Great, we've got some hands up. Excellent, a few ticks. Great, thank you everyone. So just a little reminder that today's session is being recorded and the recording will be uploaded as soon as it becomes available. Please turn your video off if it isn't already. Nerida will be using hers just at the start of the session just to say hello before she jumps into the content, but we do ask that you keep your video turned off just so that things run a little smoother and they don't get slowed down by video. If you do have a question throughout the session, Nerida's happy to address some questions, so please feel free to post them to the chat. If we have time at the end of the session, we are able to turn your microphone on. Just raise your hand and let us know that you have a question to ask, and we can do that for you. So if you haven't already found the chat window, it will be by default in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. So as I mentioned earlier, please feel free to post your questions or any comments you have throughout the session via that chat window. And Sue, Jackie and myself will help to monitor those chat questions as we're going through. A quick reminder about the participant tools that we'll be using today or that we might be prompting you to use, and you've already found some of these. So just above the participant list, we've got a number of icons to choose from. So hiding underneath the smiley face, there's a few different emoticons that you can choose from to let us know how you're going throughout the session. If you do need to move away from your computer during the session, no problem, use the second icon. It just lets us know that you're actually not at your desk and watching live. If you do have a question, as I mentioned earlier, use the raise your hand icon, or if you have a yes answer, and then last but not least, the fourth icon along allows you to give a yes or no answer using the tick or the cross hiding underneath there. So what I'll do now is hand over to Sue to do the introductions for today.
Thanks, Jenny, and thank you everyone for attending. Today's session is titled Creative Commons and Copyright, an Introduction and Overview. And today's presenter is Nerida Quartermath, who is the University Copyright Officer at QUT. She's a member of the Research Support section of the Library, and part of her role is Project Manager for Creative Commons Australia at QUT. Nerida is currently developing a resource pack of educational material for the GLAM sector, which will support and enable individuals and institutions to develop local knowledge and deliver Creative Commons information in their community. So welcome, Nerida, and I'll pass over to you now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much, Sue. Can everyone see me for a moment? I'll just say hello, let you see my face in case we haven't met before. We'll start the presentation. What I thought I would do today is just go back and give a background overview. I'm sure you're all very familiar with Creative Commons, but I thought it might be nice to just go back and look at the principles behind Creative Commons licenses. but then specifically talk about what they mean, and then just follow up with some other related considerations. So I'm just because it's a little black, I just want to make sure, can people indicate that they can hear me and that everything is all right? Great. Yeah. Okay. So, Creative Commons. It filled the gap between all rights reserved and the public domain. Before Creative Commons came along, a creator or an author could either reserve all their copyrights or give them all away. There was no halfway, but with Creative Commons, a creator can now maintain their copyright while granting certain reuse permissions. And the Creative Commons license framework provided a standardized way to do this on a set of conditions that you could choose from. So it moved the slide rule that you can see there along a little bit from all rights reserved to a number of rights reserved, or some rights reserved, as you often see. Creative Commons sits right alongside of copyright. The licenses don't reduce, limit, or restrict any rights under the exceptions to copyright law or the limitations to copyright, such as fair dealing or fair use in other jurisdictions. If your use of CC licensed material would otherwise be allowed because of an applicable exception or limitation, then you don't need to rely on the Creative Commons license or comply with its terms and conditions for your use. When you find a work that's been released under a Creative Commons license, you are always free to share, copy, and redistribute in any medium or format. And this permission can't be taken away as long as you follow the other license conditions. Creative Commons is suitable for all copyrightable materials except for software. Creative Commons uses icons which are universally recognized, so they're not language specific or dependent for recognition. And of course, one of the most valuable aspects, which I will talk about in more detail, is that CC's license metadata or digital code is embedded, making it machine readable. It's one of its main powers, that licensed material becomes searchable and retrievable. So you've probably seen this depiction before, but I'll just spend a little while talking around that. So all of the legal tools we've created are designed with the web in mind. And the licenses have this three-layer design, which just gives three ways to communicate the license. One is for machines, one is for plain English, the human readable form, and the other one is for legal interpretation, the legal code. So I'm just going to talk about each of those. So searching for open content is an important function that's enabled by the machine readable metadata. When you mint a license for online use, all you have to do is copy and paste the HTML from the license chooser template into your web page editor. That HTML code summarizes the license and the associated metadata, such as author and date, into a format that software, search engines, and other kinds of technology can understand. this is what is behind your Google search for Creative Commons content, or you know, CC photos on Flickr, or music albums on Jamendo, just to name a few examples. And then there's the human readable layer of the license design, and this is the one that we see when we click on a Creative Commons license link. It sums up, you know, the most important terms and conditions of the license in non-technical language. It's the user-friendly interface to the library. So you can see the example there. It basically outlines the permissions that you have to share, to adapt. And then the third layer is the legal code, and that's the actual license. We don't need to see it as users, but of course it's the one that was drafted by lawyers and gives the legal interpretation and effect according to domestic and international copyright laws. So the screen now shows you all of these familiar buttons, or I'm sure that they're familiar to you, and what I referred to before when I said you don't need language to understand what these buttons mean. The button is just the snapshot of the license, and it's the 4 elements of Creative Commons licenses combined into the 6 available licenses. So the 4 conditions or elements are what you choose when you are considering how available or how open you want to make your work, or in anticipation of how adaptable you want your work to be for people using your work. You would all be familiar with the fact that attribution is the base condition to all of the licenses, and also the attribution license is the most permissive of the licenses. Now, that's in terms of use. In terms of the protection of the copyright of, or the copyrights of the author, all of your rights are retained in all of the licenses, but it's for the user that you see different levels of permission and therefore reusability. So when I say CC is the most permissive, it's the most permissive for use, and the CC BY, NC, ND, non-commercial, no derivatives, is the least permissive or most restrictive in terms of what a reuser can do with your licensed work. Just a pretty picture snapshot of all the flags. As I said, the licenses are operable around the world. They've been designed by legal experts in all of the countries and aligned to not only domestic laws, but importantly, international copyright laws. Just for information, there are around 300 affiliates for Creative Commons working around the world who've worked on these licenses that have effect in, I think, about 79 countries. Just some background information that was provided in the 2014 Creative Commons State of the Nation, or State of the Commons rather, report. It just shows you that the conservative estimate in 2014 was that there are 882 approximately million CC licensed works. Now in 2015 we expect that to exceed 1 billion Creative Commons licensed works, and that's a conservative estimate. We can't capture all Creative Commons license instances. And of course, these are across images, videos, songs, podcasts, government works, educational and scholarly works, scientific data, and so on. What you can also see from the graphic on the right is that there is a clear trend toward openness. More creators are allowing adaptations and commercial use than before. 76% of works licensed allow adaptations, and now 58% allow commercial use. Also, the number of free culture works has increased from about 40% in 2010 to 56% in 2014. When I talk about free culture works, I'm talking about those things which have been licensed either as a CC BY or CC BY ShareAlike license, and I would bring into that also CC0 works which have been dedicated to the public domain. So I'm just going to keep moving on. I don't think I see any questions coming from anybody yet. Is that right? Okay, so I'll just keep going for now. And just talk about a few more principles with Creative Commons licensing. Versioning. You're probably all aware that the current version of version suite of licenses is version 4. These are regarded as our first lot of truly international licenses. So for versions 3 and earlier, Creative Commons offered ported versions, ported being domestic versions of its 6 core licenses that were modified to reflect local nuances in the expression of legal terms and conditions, perhaps relating to languages. The ported licenses and the international licenses are all intended to be legally effective everywhere anyway. But the version 4 licenses are regarded as being interoperable and international. The links that you can see in the PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint is available to you all, and you're all welcome to use it as you wish, give you links to further information. So if you want to know about the historical versions of the licenses, that link will take you to that information. So I'm just going to speak about the licenses one by one in the context, I guess, of open access and what the licenses mean to authors and users. As I indicated before, for authors, all of their rights are maintained or retained by them. So the licenses don't change in terms of the exclusive rights of the copyright owner. But let's talk about what it means in terms of reuse. So the CC BY license, this is the most permissive of the licenses. The words that you see there on the human readable form of the license say that users can distribute, remix, that means adapt if we were thinking of the words of copyright law, tweak, build upon, even commercially, as long as they give you credit. And as we talked about before, attribution is the baseline of all of the Creative Commons 6 licenses. So I guess in terms of open access, we would say that this is fully open. It's the one that we recommend for maximum dissemination and also reuse of materials. Just note as well when we're talking about attribution that through the historical development of the licenses, the mode of attribution has changed. It's become more accommodating, I think. But that's one of the reasons why it's a good idea probably to have a look at the license to see what conditions actually attach to that license, because attribution is an example of where the requirements have changed slightly over the versions. And as I said, in the case of attribution, it's progressively become more flexible with each version. It's also possible under all the license versions for a licensor to release works anonymously and to waive the requirement by not providing authorship information. So one of the really flexible aspects of licensing or accommodating aspect of licenses or works as they appear on the internet is that where an element of attribution information isn't provided by the licensor, then the licensee isn't required to chase after it and provide it. So Maureen has just asked, when they say credit, is it as simple as referencing the source? Maureen, I think, are we talking about attribution? And there are suggestions for best practice for attribution. There's a link a little bit along in the presentation. So would you make sure that I highlight that or answer your question about that before the end and make sure that I've interpreted your question correctly? Okay, CC BY SA, ShareAlike. This is a license that's used by Wikipedia and it's recommended for materials that would benefit from incorporating content from Wikipedia and similarly licensed projects. So the ShareAlike licenses require that once a licensee adapts an original work, then the licensee must make their adapted work available under the same conditions as the original work. Note that the condition to license alike kicks in when the derivative or the adaptation is shared. Until it's shared, it doesn't have any effect. And there's some interesting recent US case law now, Douglas and Kappa Map Group, which you could Google. It's been talked about a lot in social media recently. And the court said that Kappa Map Group, who used a photograph which Mr. Douglas had made available under a ShareAlike license, the court said that it was okay for this commercial group to put it on their commercial website because there was no non-commercial restriction on the license when they put an unadapted work on their website. There was no derivative, so there was no activation of the ShareAlike restriction. So that's some interesting recent case law. The other thing is sometimes there are compatibility issues with ShareAlike licenses and the different versions of the licenses. Just to make sure that you are sharing alike across a different version, there's an interpretation page and table. And I didn't include the link on that slide, but if you were to search Creative Commons compatible licenses, you could see a discussion and guidance on compatibility of the different versions of the ShareAlike licenses. And actually that also applies to other licenses, so licenses outside of the Creative Commons suite. So if you were adapting material made under another open license like a GPL license, I don't want to confuse or complicate the discussion, but there's guidance there. And that's also something I'm happy to talk to individuals about if they ever have any queries. Okay, let's talk about the non-commercial condition. So the non-commercial license lets others do the remix, tweak, and build upon your work, but only non-commercially. Although their new works must acknowledge you and be non-commercial, they don't have to license their derivative works on the same terms, unlike the ShareAlike license. The non-commercial licenses expressly define non-commercial as not primarily intended for or directed toward commercial advantage or monetary compensation. The inclusion of primarily in the definition recognizes that no activity is completely disconnected from commercial activity. I think this is something that we all think about a lot. And so, you know, in this condition, it's only the primary purpose of the reuse that needs to be considered. Hopefully that makes it a little bit easier for you to feel confident in the academic setting specifically, where most of our activities are not directly commercial, that we can still use non-commercial licensed material. Some people have criticized the license by saying that it's not clear enough, but in fact it was designed to be flexible. The definition, according to Creative Commons, is specific enough to make its intended operation and reach clear, but versatile enough to be able to cover a wide variety of use cases. Narrowly or exhaustively attempting to prescribe every permitted and prohibited activity is an impossible task, and Creative Commons thought it was an ill-advised one. So the definition sets out a principle for determining what uses do and do not qualify, but it doesn't list specific use cases. And I think, as a lot of us who are operating in copyright would say, when you're in doubt, ask permission or have a discussion with the licensor, and if you get their approval, then you're fine to go anyway. Great. Oh, thank you for putting up the those links. And yes, someone pointed out that the links are at the end of the presentation as well. Thanks very much for keeping up with that. Okay, so as we move to the more restrictive permissions given to users on the licenses, now you see the combination of both the non-commercial and the ShareAlike term. So it means that others can adapt and build upon your work, but only non-commercially, and they have to license their adaptations or remixes under identical terms. And then if we just have a look at the addition to the base of no derivatives. So as I said, this license is still allowing for sharing, so redistribution, commercial and non-commercial, but so long as it's passed along unchanged and in whole or verbatim, depending upon the format of the work that you are speaking about. In version 4 licenses, licensees are granted permission to create adaptations of material licensed under one of the no derivative licenses, but not permission to share the adaptations publicly. So again, if you are able to control distribution for your purposes in perhaps using something licensed under this, then, you know, if you cropped an image, for example, so long as you weren't publicly putting it onto the internet, you can still use that work. So again, just as in another one of in the ShareAlike case, it's only when you publish your work that the condition actually kicks in. In general, private personal use doesn't require the permission of the licensor. Yeah. So then if we combine into our license attribution with non-commercial and no derivatives, this is where we come to the license that reserves all of our rights as a creator and is the most restrictive in terms of how people can reuse your work. So a reuser can download and share your work, but they can't change them in any way, and there is no commercial use allowed. I just want to talk about the Creative Commons public domain tools, which are very important, I think, to the GLAM sector and to digital collections and making material available most permissively. So there are actually two different public domain tools that I'm going to just talk about. The first one is, and the icon that you see on the left, is the CC0 tool. And CC0 is for a creator to apply to their work to waive all of their copyrights in a work, effectively making the dedication of the work into the public domain, and it's called the public domain dedication tool. It has actually got a license behind it because the person doing that has to be aware that they have now given up all of their rights in a work. The icon that you see on the right is just the public domain mark, and that's where we indicate that there are that we know that material has passed into the public domain by virtue of expiration or surrender of copyright. It's also the equivalent of what Flickr uses, you know, the known rights that you see now in on image websites like Flickr. So it's important to note the difference probably for us as curators that in a library or GLAM sector, if we want to indicate that works in our collection have no known copyright restrictions, then we would use the public domain mark on the right. But if we were a creator and we were choosing to waive our rights, then we would use the CC0 license on the left. In the same way that you can mint your licenses, and I will talk about this again before the end, but I was just going to say not everyone is aware that you can mint these public domain tools in the same way, but using a different part of Creative Commons website as you can with the license chooser. But I'm going to go into the license chooser a little bit later. But again, the public domain tools have metadata sitting behind them, which makes them discoverable. So minting those is an important part of the generation process. Few other things to think about with Creative Commons, and something that I get asked quite a lot is that including CC license work in a collection, which is just a work comprised of separate and independent works. So, you know, it could be a book, it can be a PowerPoint, it can be any collection of materials. That including different licensed work is permitted by all of the CC licenses. However, whatever license that you choose for the collective work as a whole, it doesn't affect what you can put into your presentation. So there's no need for what, as I've tried to explain, I think with each of the licenses individually, just because you have used a ShareAlike licensed work doesn't mean that your collective work needs to be licensed ShareAlike. So that's one of the great flexibilities as well. You can combine materials, and as you'll see at the end of my presentation, and you see it a lot now on websites and things, all you need to do is say, except where otherwise noted, this work is licensed in this particular way. As I mentioned at the beginning, really the only works that can't have Creative Commons licenses applied to them are software, and Creative Commons recommends the Free Software Foundation or Open Source Initiative licenses for software. Unlike software-specific licenses, the CC licenses don't contain specific terms about the distribution of source code, which is really important for ensuring free reuse and modifiability of software. Many software licenses also address patent rights, which are important to software, but not applicable to other copyrightable works. Also, our licenses are currently not compatible with the major software licenses. So it would be difficult to integrate a CC license work with other free software. Yeah, so it just doesn't, they don't marry. I'll just touch quickly on data. CC licenses are very suitable for data sets and databases. But I think the best thing that I can do is refer you to our two great Australian sources for that information. One will be the Ausgol framework, the Ausgol website, and also the ANZ website has excellent information on data and licensing. Oh, sorry, Jackie's got a question. If a work has a CC license, is it then incorrect to also use the copyright symbol? No, Jackie, it's entirely appropriate. The copyright stamp stamps your copyright, and it's also very useful for stamping a date, because the Creative Commons license endures for as long as copyright endures. So putting copyright 2015 and your details, your ownership details, gives people basic attribution and duration of copyright information. And then after you've put your copyright symbol, you can follow it up with your CC button. I just also want to mention that content covered by a Creative Commons license is not included in the statutory licenses or the payment of royalties. You can see a statement there from Copyright Agency about that. As I mentioned, and I'm not sure how many of you have experience with minting licenses, it's very easy to apply a Creative Commons license to a work. If you go to the Creative Commons license chooser, we call it, it takes you through a few questions, and those questions relate to the uses that you want to afford to reusers. You work through the questions, and then you end up with a minted license as the final step. Incredibly easy to do. It applies to both online and offline work, So you can see that part of the form lets you specify the format of the work, and then in the final step it just gives you what you need to give effect to the license in that particular format. So either providing you with HTML, XMP, or just a static statement of the license. And as you can see, you can put in your attribution requirement, and that goes back a little bit to what's needed in terms of giving credit. The way you want to be attributed, the more you fill in, the more useful that is for the reuser and for you to gain benefit of proper attribution. Talking about attribution, as I said before, the license framework is generous and forgiving with attribution. I guess that fits in with the fact that we are applying Creative Commons licenses because we want to share rather than we want to reserve. There's a really useful guide for attribution. You've got the URL there. As I mentioned, requirements have changed, but currently and generally, TASL is the acronym that we use. As many of these as you can provide. So again, what you as a creator put in is what reusers can take out in terms of attributing you, but along the lines of title, author, source, and license. Just note that a URI is required for proper attribution if it's reasonably practical to include it. And you know, one of the aspects of downstream locking up is that, you know, if we continue to provide fulsome attribution including URI, then it makes it easier to constantly go back to the original source of the work. Some other considerations just in terms of marking our own licenses. So that's sort of talked a bit about what I was referring to. People can only attribute you as best as you have marked your work. And so, you know, that can vary. Of course, you know, academically through to popular culture uses, there are all sorts of variations that you're going to see. But that was just an example of how the elements of attribution are combined to go into a license. And note as well that, you know, the versioning, the history of the licenses. Obviously, we will now see more and more material that was licensed under previous versions. Those versions, unless they were, even if they were formally retired, they don't lose their effectiveness. So the fact that we're now at version 4 doesn't make a version 2 license invalid. That continues for the duration of copyright. Also a helpful aid to marking is that Microsoft Office offers a Creative Commons add-in which you can download for free, and it works on all Office applications. So I have it for Office on my PC, so it means that all of my Word documents and PowerPoints and so forth, I can just use the add-in to automatically mint the license for me. I don't have to go to the license chooser to do it. I just work from the add-in. So that's something useful for e-journal editors, for authors, for librarians to have to easily license their works. So just about finished now, and yes, will there be a version 5 license? Yes, probably. There isn't one in the pipeline. There are no changes which are requiring Creative Commons to consider a new suite of licenses in the near future. So I would expect that version 4 is going to be around for a number of years, Jackie. So just as a summary, you know, the licenses are robust. They're built on copyright law. They do provide clarity and also specificity. The data is embedded within assets, so you know it enables the whole browse and search function. Minimizes overhead for individual transactions. It's just so fabulous that people, you know, an author can grant reusage rights, and then, you know, we don't have to go back for permissions and so forth. It gives us a clear way to share public domain collections. It gives us a clear way to share all of our collections, because works within a collection can be differently licensed, and reusers know exactly what their rights are from license to license because it's clearly stated. And they're just some sort of promotional, if we were trying to sell the licenses, that we can use open license work as a promotional educational tool. Obviously, this is the sharing culture we're creating for the Commons. It increases reach and impact of works and collections. It fosters great goodwill with the public, and it ultimately can lead to a refocusing of resources and new funding and revenue models. Two easy ways to get Creative Commons information. So I didn't introduce the Australian affiliate, but as you all know, there is Creative Commons Australia. It's actually made up of the affiliate group at QUT, but also, as of the beginning of this year, it's a tri-party affiliate, and our other affiliate members are Ausgol, who are the Australian government open access and licensing framework, and also the Smart Copy, the National Education Copyright Unit. So when you go to the Creative Commons Australia website, there's Australian-specific information there. We also link to the international site, certainly in terms of the essential licensing and information. The search tool, they're all being served out from the creativecommons.org website. But apart from the very public-facing web pages, the resource that I would really like you all to know about is the Creative Commons Wiki. Now that's really where the workface for Creative Commons deployment is. It's where you will get a lot of questions answered. So in the first instance, if you have a question about an aspect of Creative Commons licensing, go straight to the wiki and start your search from there. It has information in terms of reuse, but also in terms of developer information with the licenses. So that would be a really big thing for me to tell you as a group today, to be familiar with the existence of the wiki site. And that was where I'm going to stop and allow questions, but just before I do that, I thought I had I thought I had a last page that also might have had some more information on it. But sorry, I think that's another presentation. I've just lost myself in time there. So are there any more questions? Oh, thanks Jenny for putting the wiki up there. I think now we could open the microphone up to the floor perhaps. Hello.
So everyone's microphone should be turned on now if anyone would like to ask a question live via audio, or you're more than welcome to post in chat if you prefer also. Looks like we have a few posts coming via chat. Nerida?
Yep. Okay, so what do we mean by GLAM publishing? Oh well, I didn't mean it in any specific or formal way. I think that's from Jill. GLAM, obviously, just galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. And if I use the two words together, I'm just talking about publishing and communicating generally. How close to the image? Oh, that's a great question. Thanks, Dave. It has to be proximate, but it doesn't need to be on an image. So if you have an aesthetic requirement where you don't want to put an attribution against an image, Dave, yeah, put it at the end of the slides. And in fact, that was what I was thinking then, but what I realized in my presentation was that I had actually tethered the attributions to the images that were in my presentation, but it'd be perfectly acceptable for me to have a slide at the end. The other thing that we notice, for example, at the minute the 3-minute thesis competition is on, and I think the competitors are allowed one slide, and they don't like to crowd the slide with attributions. It's actually okay to put your attributions on, say, a website that you then make available. So it doesn't have to be even embedded within the same work. It just has to be readily accessible. There are no requirements as to formatting, but it obviously has to be readable so that you can understand the attribution and go to the source. So yeah, does that answer the question, that particular question? Great. And then Maureen, did you say if there was a cost? There's no cost. Creative Commons licenses are free. Creative Commons is a not-for-profit organization. You'll notice these days when you go to the Creative Commons website that there is an almost constant appeal for donations to support the work of Creative Commons, but there is absolutely zero cost to the licenses. And that doesn't matter if you're an individual or an organization, whether you're the Hewlett-Packard organization or whether you're you know, a creator sitting at home on your PC. Yep. Great. Oh, well, thanks for your time, everyone, and thanks Sue and Jackie and Jenny. It was a real pleasure to present. And as you know, I work at QUT, and I'm very happy to assist with any questions you might have about Creative Commons and about deploying the licenses within your institutions.
Hi everyone, it's Sue here. Thank you very much, Nerida. That was a really interesting presentation. And thank you everyone for attending. If we could just show our appreciation. Oops, I've pressed the wrong button, I've raised my hand. And just give Nerida a little round of applause there, that would be lovely. So thank you again, Nerida. I'd like to remind everyone of the next session, which is on the 9th of September, and it's Citation Metrics and Research Impact. Helen Morgan will be the presenter, and she's the manager from Scholarly Communication and Digitisation Services at UQ. So the fun continues next week, and thank you all for attending. Thanks, Merida.
Thanks, Merida. That was great.